Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the workshop of the Board of County Commissioners. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
The County Administrator and Board, Mike Scholl with Ayres Associates, and I will be presenting on the Montezuma County Housing Needs Assessment that we've been working on with James and your team at the county here for about the last kind of 9 to 10 months. Just real quick, just the introduction who we are. We're at Ayres Associates. We're a multidisciplinary firm with office out of Fort Collins, but in the West we have an office in Cheyenne, Wyoming as well, and we do a lot of work in rural communities around the state. Actually, I think we kind of pride ourselves on being able to do a lot of work in smaller communities. We literally work, I joke, in the Fort, we work Cortez to Lamar to Julesburg to Craig, and just about all points in between. So we do a lot of work in smaller communities, and we were awarded the grant to kind of assist with this housing needs assessment. So from the project standpoint, it's a grant through the Department of Local Affairs, and I'm just going to go through a little bit of what we've done to date as we kind of gear up to the final report. We've done multiple engagement efforts during the development of the report and provided kind of guidance and work with staff to kind of better understand the local housing needs. We completed a process mapping exercise that we went through with your staff and the staffs from the communities on kind of what are the steps you have to go through and kind of understanding kind of how the process works at a staff level. We did a development workshop. We did a community survey, which we got 634 individual responses, and we did some community outreach, and we work with particularly with some of your partner jurisdictions in the county. And all of that will be captured in the final report. The results of the survey, we'll include that as an attachment as well, so once that comes out. But before I get into the kind of meat of it, when we were working through this, I know there seemed like at some point there was some confusion about what we're actually doing, and so I wanted to take a minute and just kind of define what it is and what it's not. Our effort was to better understand the housing conditions and challenges, to help inform you at the policy of the policy level, and to help promote some cooperation between the jurisdictions in terms of housing, and then use some of that information to leverage future grant opportunities that support affordable housing. What it's not is we're not developers. We're not here to develop housing. We're not here to promote dense urban style housing in rural areas. I'm not sure. I think, James, we heard that maybe somebody had mentioned that, but I think it's kind of antithetical to kind of what we do. I was almost a little offended, not at you, but that only because we want to promote housing that makes sense within the local values of your county and within the infrastructure that exists in your county. So we're not here to kind of promote or place our values onto kind of what you're doing here in Montezuma County. We're here to kind of help you think of what you have and kind of how you can kind of make it better and respond to those needs. So I wanted to be clear about that and share that with you. And by the way, if there's any questions or anything, feel free to stop me. I'm more than happy. We can, if there's any confusion or questions. Before I get into some of the takeaways and some of the recommendations, I like to do this when I work in communities, is to help define affordability. When we talk about housing and we talk about affordable and attainable and workforce and low income, a lot of these terms get used interchangeably and thrown around, and people have kind of different definitions of what they mean. And so from a state kind of a policy framework, I wanted to include this chart in here to kind of give you an idea when we use these terms, what we're talking about in terms affordable workforce, attainable. So this is based on the area median income. It's published by each county in the country every spring by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And this is the chart that's used to determine kind of affordability for grant programs at the state level and at the federal level. And so this is the information that's used, and this is how it's defined. If you look, as an example, you have an average family size in Montezuma County of just under 3. So a household of 3 at 100% of the area median income, which would be average, earns about $78,300, and you can see how that breaks out by household income. Generally, the affordable attainable is above 100% up to 140%. Where it gets a little kind of gray is kind of in that 80 to 100, because anything above 80% of AMI, the state, they allow you to apply to leverage the state grant funding is attainable housing, particularly if it's a for sale product. And then between 60 and 80%, that's generally considered what you'll hear is workforce housing. That's a little bit of a lower income, but somebody that's still making a fairly decent, respectable living. And then extremely low income, at that level, you're looking at those are more the low income housing tax credit deals, the below 30%, the very low income. So those are the bands, and from an income perspective, what we talk about when we use those terms. So, and this will be included in the report as well. It's publicly available, but I just wanted to kind of share that, so if we use some of the terms, it's clear what we're talking about or what we're referring to. So just some key takeaways. I'll go through each of these in a little bit more detail. One of the things that we found was, there's a need to promote collaboration and capitalize on some of the resources that you have. A need to promote greater housing diversity, affordability, and resources. And when I say housing diversity, what I mean is different housing types at different price points. I'll get into that a little bit more. And then there's also a need to kind of plan a little bit more for the future. So going through each of them in a little more detail. There's a need to kind of work collaboratively with local jurisdictions on planning efforts. And really what it comes down to, it's a recognition that urban level development should occur within incorporated communities and where existing infrastructure exists. One of the things that we found, and it gets back to kind of the part about what this is not. We're not promoting the idea that you should be developing out in rural areas of the county. What we think you should do is work with the local communities to build housing where infrastructure exists, where it makes sense within incorporated communities. But there's been some confusion, and I think, between the jurisdictions about the different planning areas and at what point where infrastructure exists, where annexations occur. And so I think there was some things we have some recommendations around that to help kind of streamline that a little bit. And then there's the need to kind of work with existing resources, particularly the Montezuma Housing Authority. The Housing Authority, they've done about, I think, 11 projects in their history. They're the affordable housing developer in most communities. And so I think generally speaking, and this is when a lot of housing authorities started in probably the 50s, 60s, 70s, they were doing extremely low income. They were doing the tax credit deals with developers. They were doing the Section 8 vouchers. But at this day and age, as needs have risen and costs have risen, a lot of housing authorities have taken on more of an affordable, attainable developer role where they're developing that workforce housing. And I think they're positioned to do it. They're able to leverage and access grant funding. So I think that they're an important player within this framework in terms of being able to promote kind of housing for the community. And then moving on to the next takeaway, the housing diversity, affordability, and resources. one of the things that we found is that your population has remained fairly stable over quite a long period of time. I think on average you're adding about 150 residents per year. You're 26,000 roughly, and I think you're not seeing the huge population spikes that a lot of the Front Range communities are in different mountain towns. But the challenge that you have is that your housing stock is older. It's not that you don't have the housing stock for the population because your population is growing. It's just the housing stock that you have is older, so it requires more. One of the things we heard quite a bit from the community survey was, there are houses we can buy, but the challenge is we have to put another 50, 60, 75,000 into them to bring them up to code, and that, even though the sale price is viewed as being affordable, the amount of money you have to put into them to kind of bring them up to kind of more modern standards presents some challenges. So part of it is what we're seeing is it's not that you have you need a lot of new houses to support population that's in migrating. It's more you have refresh your housing stock for the people that do live here, and to give opportunities for younger people to kind of stay and remain and build up some equity and wealth over time. The other thing is senior housing. This is fairly common. That most rural communities or smaller communities we work in deal with, there just aren't a lot of senior housing opportunities. And what happens is as seniors stay in their houses longer, it limits the supply of houses that would be available for young families and young couples. In part because, and I understand it, I'm certainly not trying to be critical of older residents. I mean, it's their home. It's just that when their kids have moved out and as they get older and they've got a 2 or 3 bedroom house and you have 2 people that are living there, it doesn't fit. But if they had a place where they could go and then that house then becomes available for a younger family, it just creates some opportunities on the supply side of that economic equation. And again, just reinforce the need to work with the housing authority. And as far as the going on to the kind of next takeaway, the need for planning for the future, there's a need to update the county comprehensive plan and the land use code. And some of this land use policy should align with the current housing needs that promote housing targeted at local workforce. One of the things we did here, because what we try to do is kind of look at what we see statistically, what the information is telling us, and then see how that aligns with the community sentiment that we get within the survey, just to see if there's any disconnect. And I think one of the things that we heard, in terms of local workforce, was that obviously housing doesn't exist in a bubble, but there was a lot of people were interested in kind of jobs and promoting kind of jobs and employment as well, to make sure that kind of wages and opportunities to gain wealth, kind of align with kind of the housing prices. So there was a lot of concern. We heard a lot of comments about the need for kind of job growth as well to kind of support some of the housing needs. And I think that what I've said before, I think, is just make sure that the development is kind of occurs within municipal boundaries and where that infrastructure exists. I think that was one of the big issues is the community's infrastructure grows out and into the kind of county or adjacent. It's when somebody wants to tap into that and making sure that there's a process and an understanding kind of what the county expects from that development, and then what the communities expect in terms of being able to kind of tap into that infrastructure and to do it in a way that's seamless and efficient and kind of promotes good quality housing. With that said, with the kind of the takeaways, just looking at some of the housing market projections, we did look at kind of the overall demand And it really, it's hard to do kind of a demand for Montezuma kind of to look at it kind of as its own entity, because it really varies from community to community. What we're seeing is there's a growing demand in Mancos. They're seeing pressure. They're seeing the greatest kind of upward pressure in terms of housing costs and prices right now. Cortez has an abundant housing supply. There's just a lack of newer housing units that are affordable to most of the folks in the community, and part of that has to do with just the reality that construction costs are such that, you know, to build a new single-family home, you're at 450,000, you know, just in materials, and so that for a lot of folks in the county, that's out of reach. So, you know, to build a new single-family home at that cost, and that's, as I said, I mean, concrete's concrete, lumber's lumber. I mean, will you pay for it here? You're going to pay for it in Denver or where any other, you know, community. That doesn't change. So to some extent, you know, that's a challenge that's difficult to overcome. We met with Dolores, and Dolores has, you know, they're kind of a little different. I mean, they have limited affordable housing for kind of more their essential workforce, their school, but they actually have a large proportion of their population as part-time residents, and they have some challenges with just developable ground because of being kind of in that river, with the river, and the kind of the topography creates some challenges. And as I mentioned before, most of the housing challenges in the county, it just stems from a lack of new supply rather than kind of an overwhelming demand, you know, that you're getting from people coming in. So, but it's a need to kind of refresh what you do have. From a housing price, you know, I looked at the home values for where we had the latest data available. You know, obviously this shouldn't be a shock to anyone. Housing prices have gone up pretty dramatically over the last 4 or 5 years. It's 39% in the state and 30% in Montezuma, at 282,000. You know, so you're seeing those increases in prices, not as dramatically, but you're certainly still seeing them. And then, oh, sorry, just.
I have a question for you, because
Sure.
the 2022, obviously 2 years ago, I would be curious, is there a slide that shows the 2024 current prices? Because 282 right now, as an average home value, I'm not sure that really exists here.
Yeah, I think we'll have to, we'll double check, because we'll update when we get to the final report.
Okay.
Usually with 2024, because they don't, the data that we get from the demographer's office and the state and the census is usually retrospective, and so that's sometimes it's a limitation on the data. But I do think one of the things I'm going to make sure we do is we update at least to 2023, and then typically what we like to do is just go to the assessor or go to the county and look at the home sales that occurred and kind of see what those average prices are. It doesn't, the sales doesn't necessarily reflect the average home value, but I think we'll certainly go through and make sure we kind of update those before we publish the final report.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, you know, at 45% of your housing stock were built prior to 1979. That again, you know, it's fairly common in rural communities, especially as prices have gone up. It's hard to build new economically when your average sale price is right now in the 300s even. And affordable is probably in the 200s for most families looking to buy. So what we found is that, and I think this was reflected in some of the survey data, is that that more and more households now are being forced into renting because they can't afford to buy new, and so the household incomes of people that are renting is increasing, and so they're paying more, obviously, because but one of the things that I think was confirmed through some of the survey data was that a lot of people are looking for houses and they're not finding a lot of good options in the rental market, because they obviously can't afford to buy, and so they're either staying with family or other, having to kind of address it in other ways, or stay in housing maybe that they don't is, so I would say, substandard. But so I think that again, it's some of the challenges I think that you're having here locally in Montezuma. So I'm going to go the next few slides. I think I just want to summarize some of the recommendations that you'll be seeing in the final report. From a policy and regulatory framework, there's a need to kind of update the comprehensive plan. And we're also going to be working with you as kind of as a final, is to look at making sure that you have adopted the qualifying strategies that the state has put out to make sure you're eligible for state housing grants. What we found, and I'm not the code expert, my colleague Josh Olhava, who's not here today, has handled most of the code work, but your code generally is pretty flexible in terms of housing, and I think you don't really have a huge challenge meeting those qualifying strategies. The question, I think, more is if you're going to develop, at least at an urban level or at any kind of scale, you're going to do that in an incorporated city, not in the county. You're kind of working more in a partnership mode necessarily than developing within that kind of affordable housing within the unincorporated parts of the county. There's a resolution regarding the Prop 123. There's some things we'll include in there. Again, I apologize, I'm not the expert on code, but since you've opted in, there's some resolution regarding just to making sure that you consider any affordable housing within 90 days. We have some recommended policy language that it doesn't require you that you can look at and consider, that will include. But again, I think you're pretty well you're pretty well positioned, I think, in terms of eligibility. But again, it's really more a function of kind of where you develop, and who's applying for those grants, and a lot more detail. But anyway, and the other piece of it, I think, when we did the process mapping with the staff, is there's just some need to streamline some application processes, and so I think we'll make a few recommendations around that. So we talked in terms of special program and funding resources. I talked a little bit about that, the need to streamline. It's really from a funding. You're at a county. You're in a little bit of it's a little bit more of a partnership role or a facilitative role, because obviously, as I said, when you're looking to do some of that development, it's generally going to occur in incorporated communities. So it's kind of trying to understand where that development's going to take place, and making sure to the greatest extent it kind of is taking place where you have the infrastructure available, and that if there's any need for annexation or within one of those communities, that process is laid out and understood, because I think that was one area where we found some confusion, and I'll talk about that again. With the county collaboration, what we spent a lot of time discussing was looking at kind of the cooperative planning areas. And that's really just the areas around each of the incorporated, the three, Cortez, Mancos, and Dolores. Where, instead of just saying we're going to take a look at a map and we're going to do 3 miles or 1 mile from the border, what we tried to do is work with the communities and define where do you think development is likely to occur? Where does infrastructure, where's the road network, the water, the sewer lines going? Where, if you're a developer and you're thinking about building housing, where would it occur, kind of, as opposed to just making an arbitrary kind of boundary. And what we tried to do is work with the communities so that they could agree upon those cooperative planning areas, so that as you do see some new development, that you have kind of a clear understanding with those communities, with some of the terms and the what would be required to make sure that it's acceptable and it fits in your kind of overall housing policy. So, and I apologize if I don't get into that in as great a detail, but if there are some questions, I'll do my best, because my code expert is my partner, who we normally do this, he wasn't able to make it today. So with that said, the next step is we're going to complete the housing needs assessment and submit it over to James for review and finalize that. And we'll also work with you at a staff level on kind of an implementation strategy, look at what are some of the future grant opportunities that you might be able to tap into, who some of those partners might be, and what kind of a role you can play to facilitate some of those opportunities. And we expect that we'll kind of have things wrapped up probably around the end of July. But we'll obviously, our commitment is to work with you to make sure that you get everything you need. So we'll continue to kind of work with you until you're satisfied with what we've provided you. So with that said, I will pause. I don't know, James, if you have anything you wanted to add.
You're covering it pretty well here.
But if there are any questions.
No, I think I know that Commissioner Lindsay sits on a housing authority board. I do. What kind of takes me back though is if I understood this right, and reading that one slide of that question 16, it said that by using the USDA first-time home buyers right there, because of the low quality of homes in my price range, means that I cannot use the USDA first-time home buyer. So who classifies the home as low quality and unsafe or suitable for a home buyer to move into? Is that the USDA that does that?
Yeah,
and
that would be that's a part of the USDA program.
So what are their qualifications for an unsafe or suitable home? What does that mean?
We're not the we work through the state. I'd have to look into that and research and to see what those qualifications are, because those are definitely at the mortgage assistance is at the retail level.
Sure.
So it's the individual buyer.
But our people in the community need to know that. What is it? I mean, what does that mean? It's just words right
Sure.
now to me. What does it mean? If I'm looking at buying a home and I think it's suitable in my opinion, and I go to buy the home because I can live in it, and you tell me it's unsuitable or safe, I mean, safety is one thing, but
I'd have to look into that, because usually it's my understanding with the USDA is they underwrite the mortgage, provides opportunities for work with banks to underwrite the mortgages, and I know like Fannie and Freddie and other mortgage underwriters, they have requirements for the kind of housing and the square footage and things like that. I have to apologize. I just don't know exactly what those requirements are of the USDA.
I mean, if you could clarify that would be good, because I know that in this community, USDA is a big deal in this community for people using it for financing.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll definitely take that back. We'll dig into that a little bit and make sure we include.
And are those standards like a moving target? I mean, 5 years ago, are the standards
more intense than they were then. I mean, with the advent of EV chargers being required in some homes that people can't, a lot of them can't afford, you know.
Yeah.
Solar heat pumps, you know, I understand looking for lead and stuff like that, and insulation is one thing, but some of the, you know, are the new standards getting in the way?
Yeah, we could certainly kind of look into that and give you a little bit more complete.
And then this is all targeted, if I'm visualizing this correctly, to single-family homes. It's not multifamily home dwellings. This is all single-family homes.
Yeah, my understanding, at least from the USDA, is just it's a mortgage underwriting program in rural community.
Okay.
I think one of the things, to build off of that, maybe to go a little bit of a detour, I think one of the challenges that we're seeing is that building a single-family home, with the cost of hard goods and even with the challenges with labor, it's really hard to build new in small rural communities at the price points that you're going to be able to sell them for. And I think, and I say that within kind of more the traditional framework of what we expect a house to be, which is, you know, single family on a lot. And so I think one of the things that we're seeing in the market is the need for some flexibility in terms of building a duplex or different products that you can build economically and you could sell at market rate prices. You know, but part of that challenge too, and sorry, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, and I think when you talk about sometimes with mortgage financing, banks also need to catch up too, because they're not always very good about you know, they want everything to be replicable and simple, and so I think we're at a point now where I think that the market is really demanding a lot of different product types to meet some of those needs, and I think so. I think anyway, but we will look into that.
Look into that, and then the last question that I have is this is all targeted to, I mean, in my opinion, single-family homes, but there's nothing that talks about manufactured housing in here, because manufactured housing is the only thing that you're going to ever do to hit. I mean, if that target value was 282 and 22, it's higher than that now, it's not going to happen. Because by the time you buy a lot, put the infrastructure in, even if there was infrastructure in the roadway, it's still a significant cost. So I didn't see anything that had anything to say about manufactured housing in this.
No, we talk. I have to go back and look through. I know we talk about it a little bit. We actually were, just as an aside, I was working with the city of Craig on a manufactured. We did help them with a 20-unit manufactured housing for sale project. There actually will be completed in July or August. It's in their 4 or 5 plexes, so it's a 5-plex, 2 3-bedrooms, and 3 2-bedrooms. From the 3 bedrooms are about 1,300 square feet, and the 2 bedrooms are just under 1,200 square feet. And we used the vendor out of Buena Vista, the Fading West, which is the state. Yeah. And I think that the manufactured housing, and I know from talking to my colleague in Cortez that there was I think I know there's a kind of manufactured housing, a gentleman that's opening up in Mancos, and I know there's another one that was looking at this area. My experience with that, with working with Craig and helping him do, we helped them. We wrote $4.5 million worth of grant proposals for them. Manufactured housing is good. The quality is much higher, I think, than it has typically been, and it does help overcome some challenges, particularly the labor cost of doing. You know, if you don't have the deep pool of subcontractors, but I think on price, it can be a little challenging. I mean, I think it's not as much savings as I think is I think that from just a typical stick build. But I do think that they're a good fit in a lot of smaller communities where you don't have that deep labor pool. So I think we could certainly keep. I mean, we'll probably include at least the Craig project as a case study in there to look at, because they set up. They actually Craig created the Craig Housing Authority, and then the Craig Housing Authority became the developer, and then we work with them, and we did two. Like I said, to the Innovative Housing Opportunity Incentive Grant, and the traditional, the other, there were two different grant pools that we pulled from to help get that set up. So that was an instance, I think, and their target is, it's a for sale product, and they can go up to 120% of the area median income, and they got some allowances to increase it a little bit because they're in the steamboat. Even though it's a different county, but the economic market is kind of similar. So, and I think you maybe have that a little bit with La Plata and with Durango. A lot of people kind of working, commuting. So I think there are some opportunities to kind of to think about how that might work and how that product might be a good fit for Montezuma.
All right, thank you. That's all I have. Joe? Commissioner? Okay.
Good. Awesome, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, next on our agenda, James, I guess we'll leave you sitting right there, and we'll bring up Mr. Dobry. Okay, fire away. Phreatophyte program update.
Okay, so we have had Swift Creek brush cutters down there at the Johnson property for the last week. They have made significant progress down there. They've had 2 pieces of equipment, and so they have made significant progress, and we've been able to utilize our staff member, James, to go and do the follow-up spraying when those guys do the cutting. So they have 2 pieces of equipment cutting, and then he can come through and spray. We did lose one of our employees as of today. He's gone. So we're at kind of reduced capacity at this point too for our own crews. So I think my recommendation would be to go ahead and utilize Swift Creek brush cutters at least for one more week down there in the same configuration we had them set up in, and see if we can get closer to the end on this.
And what's the percentage that we have completed now? Do you have an estimate on that?
So I'm going to say we're about 60%.
Is it more dense, the 40% we're going into, or less?
Some of it is more dense, some of it is less dense. So it's just kind of a mixed bag, as you kind of know down there. They've got some pockets that are pretty bad still. Okay. But there's other portions that go pretty well. And when they use so they've got that skid steer with the big blade on the front. That goes really well out in the open flat areas. And then we got to use that excavator when you get down into the creek bottom itself. Yeah. Anything where you got a little more topography for it. So working between the two, they work pretty well on that. I'm going to say they're up to about 60%.
So what do you think they've done in a week?
I would say they've probably about 10%, I would say. We were closing in.
Compared to our 50%, so.
Yeah.
So, okay. I think I hear what you're asking is that you want to move them down there for another week, and is that the same cost that we had approved last?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, well, that makes sense to me.
They're gonna make those kind of gains, yeah.
And we still have the grant funding to cover that also, correct, or?
We do, and I'm kind of estimating through the end of June, we will have spent about $101,000 of 160.
At the end of June.
That would be through the end of June, and that would include
other
the first week
for the next week.
It would include the first week, but not the week that you
If
guys
we
would be
approve that.
authorizing. Right.
Yeah.
Gosh, I think it's, that's what your ask is, right? You're
Yes, that is
asking
the
or
ask.
recommending that?
Yes.
Okay, I would think that's a pretty reasonable ask. Commissioners, what do you?
If they're making that much progress, let's
Okay.
get it done.
Yeah, exactly, which gets us to our goal quicker that we have is to get there and to get done. So, I didn't look, but Travis, do we have that? We don't have that on for tomorrow for a decision, but we can put that on, right?
Well, we still have one more week, so it'll probably go on the next.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Well, actually, we don't
I
really
think,
have
I
one
think
more
what you're
week.
saying is you need it added now to keep them down there another
Correct.
week.
For this week, but then moving forward, we'll bring it in front of the commissioners because we had 2 bids. And I think we need to bring that additional for them to finish out the project, is how I'm understanding it.
So I'm not sure.
No, I think what you're asking, if I understand it right, we only approved
1 week.
1 week.
Correct.
And what you're recommending right now and asking for is to keep it going another week to see
Yes.
how much further we can get. So
That's
we
correct.
can add that to that
Yeah,
agenda.
we're on the same page, but moving forward after this week, we'll have to get it in front of the commissioners for the remainder of the funding. That's, yeah.
Okay, I'm following you now. Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And would it need to, I don't know that it would need to be on the agenda because you'd be approving 15, which would be Commissioner Candelaria's
Which I
authorized
could
amount.
approve that, right.
Yeah, so you
But
wouldn't need it on
it's
the agenda for
been
tomorrow.
discussed, we all know it, and the authorization can be done.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Appreciate
Very
it,
good.
gentlemen.
Anything else?
The one other thing I was going to say is that we submitted what will be the final grant reimbursement request to the Colorado Water Board grant for about a little over $42,000. With what we've spent between this project and equipment and things last year, that basically is the maximum that we could request based on the matching requirements. So, and we'll be closing that out, and that grant was originally for $125,000, but with the discontinuation of the program, this will close that out.
Okay. The last question I have then is, did you get that masticator head back functioning and working on our excavator?
Yes, our excavator is currently functional. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right,
So that should give us 3 pieces of equipment, because James can be running that equipment when he's not spraying. Spraying takes up a fair amount of time.
sure.
But when he's down with that, then he'll jump on that equipment and keep advancing.
Okay.
So, and it's the 2 pieces of equipment that actually will help us a lot because they're excavators and they can get to the rough stuff. So we'll have 2 of them on that, and then that skid steer for doing the easy stuff.
Mhm. Okay. All right, very good.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, Mr. Dobry.
I'll stay
you
down
can
here.
You can stay seated.
Thank you.
Mr. Underwood, would you like to come on and replace Mr. Dietrich? And now we're going to talk about a potential grant request for end-of-year funding. So kick it off.
It's actually 2 grants. There's the year-end distribution and a county allocation through the Keep Colorado Wildlife Funding, which is the license plate, the funding tied to license plates. The search and rescue was able to apply for these. They do have to flow through the county, but after County Administrator Anderson spoke with them and explained our process that we would need to approve it through the commissioners, and they said that would be fine and that we could switch it over to the county once it was through that approval process.
So this is just a pass-through.
It would be, yeah, for search and rescue funds.
Okay.
So like any of the others, is there the administrative fee associated with it, or?
There's not, there isn't as part of the grants. I didn't find any way to specifically charge our administrative fee that way. That could be in our discussion with search and rescue of if we charge that to do the pass-through.
Okay. Questions?
A lump sum.
Yeah. We don't know what it is basically.
They don't, yeah, so for that one, for the end of year funding, basically what they do is take any of the leftover search and rescue funding that was available for the whole year, and then divide it up between the counties or search and rescues who apply. So that's why we don't know what the amount would be. It's basically like the leftover, the overage divided by who applies for it.
Fluctuates every year
Yeah.
depending on what the calls have been for the different counties.
And they pay that as a one-time item, whereas the Keep Colorado Wildlife funding would be a reimbursement funding based on what the grant they are actually applying for.
There's no match for the county, though, correct?
There's not, no, there's no match for either.
We were just a pass-through,
Yeah.
other than right now it's administrative fees. That's
Sorry,
all
for the
I'm
last
saying.
30 years, it's been signed through the sheriff and then came back through the county. They just changed the method that it's, how the procedure takes place this year, and we didn't realize it. My apologies. That's my office, and I didn't pay attention to it. So we are having to address this now.
We understand that well.
Okay. Anything else, Robert?
No, that's all.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you both. Robert, you may stay seated.
I will stay.
Thank you, Kirk. All
Thank you,
right.
Kirk.
The Southwest Opioid Reduction District,
Yeah.
our SWORD, and our CIP Community Intervention Program. This is also another grant application submission form. And take it away, Robert.
So I'm asking to apply for, this is a new grant program that SWORD has, Southwest Opioid Response District has put together with the opioid funds through the legal action that the state took. And so they have, this is a new grant application, and community intervention program, CIP, would be a fit for that. We've discussed it with our partners at the municipalities, and basically the county would be applying for this, and then it would continue, this funding would continue with the project wherever the project ends up living. And we would be applying for the maximum amount, which would be $77,548.
Okay, questions?
No.
We'll just have to pay really close attention when we actually get the grant language before we sign that this grant travels with the project.
program.
Because
Yeah.
a lot of grants I've seen are non-assignable. And so that
This-
would be my concern. We don't want to get locked into this thing and then get locked into a program for another year that we have no intention of carrying on for another year. So the devil's going to be in the details
It will,
there.
and the way that Region 9, who's kind of the parent of SWORD, is paying it is, they'll pay the grant in August, the full amount, whatever is awarded, and so that money would come to the county as part of that program, and then as there's a transition to another entity, we would just send those funds with that transition.
Got it.
But it wouldn't
So it
be,
doesn't tie us.
there wouldn't be an ongoing.
Well, we don't
there
know
wouldn't-
yet 'cause
There
we
wouldn't
haven't
be an
seen it.
ongoing reporting, there wouldn't be, yeah,
Okay,
We'll look at it when we get it.
yeah,
understand. Okay,
that's all I've got.
well, if that's all you have, we have come to the end of our meeting and we are adjourned. Unless you gentlemen have anything else.
I do not.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, Robert.